Awesome. Well, thanks for joining Marketing Club Mondays as we get to our hands-on Halloween event. Really appreciate the time. So I think later tonight we're going to be talking about surveys front to end. But before we kind of get through that, we've got a guest, Gustavo from Holt University, right here in Boston. So we were hoping to hear from you about some words about your efforts to get students involved with Salesforce. So I will kick it over to you, Gustavo.
Right. Thank you so much, Matt. Before I start my chat with you guys, I just want to say that I really wish I could be with you in person. I just had like an emergency. I had to book like a last hour flight to back to Brazil, but I'm going to be back in Boston this Sunday. I'll make sure to attend all the next events in person. So I'm Gustavo. I am a student at Holt International Business School. It's a small business school located in Cambridge. We have campuses across like the whole world, Dubai, London, San Francisco, New York. We had one in Shanghai. And I'm the lead of the Google Developer Group on chapter at my university. So I'm gonna explain why I'm be mentioning this club so much in doing this conversation. But I think a lot of things that I applied and I learned with this, we could use the same reasoning process behind with the Salesforce community at our university. So pretty much we are a student-led community. We're backed by Google, and we enjoy all the benefits that Google could provide us. So we host all sorts of workshops, panels, discussions. We host like big events, and we really enjoy their ecosystem to support us on that. So I didn't prepare like a presentation because I know this is going to be like a sort of like a chat, and I only have like a couple of minutes, but I can show some images later of our previous events. So what we've been doing and what we were very successful at doing is that we partnered with our professors and deans to create these events. So what we did, the last event that we did, we since I started like as a leader, and I've been in this club for like 2 years now. We did like 3 events this year, and they're like very successful. And I think that, and as I talked to Tim before, there's an important gap that we can explore for the Salesforce ecosystem and community to hold. So we did like Dev Fest. It was a major event. We had like 700 RSVPs, and we have like sort of like 400 people coming to our university. This event we partner with within our university students, but also with Google Boston. So that's why we had so much attendees. We also did an event like a closed event where every presidents of GDG chapters in New England. They travel to our university because we're the one that hosted. So of course Google paid for the tickets and everything, but we had the pleasure of hosting this. And we also had an event last Thursday. It was just a minor panel discussion, but we got like a full class over there. We got like 80 to 90 attendees, so it was very important as well. And of course, we also do have workshops and all sorts of things that from Google own ecosystem, which I think is where we will be partnering with Salesforce by doing that. What we do, and that's why the secret behind our success is this partnership that we have with our organizing team at Holt. So essentially, we were very close to all the deans in our schools and in our school. And I mentioned that we're a very small business school, but it's our biggest strength because we can have like a power of action behind it. So essentially, we provide content to the masters and we partner with them. So we make like mandatory content for them. So we host some workshops with Google, like I don't know, Gemini or build with AI. So we build like AI solutions, and the dean they make sure for all the master students to attend these events because they will be very valuable. So that's pretty much what I intend to do with Salesforce, and I think it will be a very great course of action because in the beginning things are difficult and it's hard to get like to get traction for these sorts of events because they don't like catch much attention because it's technical whatever it's like a ghost for business students, right? So we gotta adapt ourselves into that. So I think that would be the right course of action behind it. And I can share to you some images of our one of the previous events. Let me just, if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just. Can you see my screen over here? It's
We
just,
Yep.
yeah, so it's just a PDF here, but It's pretty much we've been very successful so far, and we mix all this sorts of we have professional events and panel discussions. We do like office visits. We've been to like Google Office, Microsoft Office. So the thing that I want to extract from this is the power of an ecosystem, and of course the community. I think the community that we built behind this it's what makes everything beautiful. Like you could see here, everyone is engaged. Everyone's very happy. We have like a lot of volunteers for that fest. We got like we had, as I mentioned, almost 400 attendees. This picture here is in the end of the event, but we got like 150 people over here, and that's the event that we did. Both is the event that we did like last Thursday. I just want to show this because I think the ecosystem that GDG provides us is something that makes us stand out in our university, and that's pretty much we are a unique club. We're the largest club at our university, and we've been very successful in that. And I think we are one of the largest GDG owned chapters in New England, pretty much because two reasons behind that. The other schools, they're not that engaged into this Google branch of educational branch. And I think we do a pretty good job as well. So these two main reasons. That's why we hosted that fest, because usually Google hosts that fest in their office. So this picture here in the bottom right, it was in Google Office, was last year's Dev Fest. But this year we had the pleasure to host in our school. So I think we have we did a pretty good job on that. But we host all sorts of events and pretty much workshops. So we're doing like a workshop right now that Google is they want us to do is regarding like building AI solutions, and we're going to be starting doing that in November. So that's what I think. That's why I developed so much about Google and their ecosystem, because I think that's where Salesforce can enter. I think there's a lot of similarities behind it, and I think it's some differences as well. As I mentioned, like the international marketing masters, they don't have a solution like this. Like GDG, we target only for MFin and MBAN, and I think they would have like a lot to add regarding everything marketing related, analytics related, at reinforce and everything. And I think it's a wonderful, and I couldn't think there's a better ecosystem to back us, support us at Salesforce. So that's why I told Tim that there's this right fit, because I think the same thing that we did with GDG and we were very successful, I think we can do with Salesforce for these marketing students. Of course, we're going to open for UGs, we're going to open for everyone else, but we're going to start this partnership, and I want to talk with our deans so we can add this into our curriculum as well. So we I think Salesforce is already very well known in our university. Every event that our university hosts, like university-wise event, we invite Gilda to come over there. Last event was Tin was amazing. It was great. She has this unique style. She hugged everyone after the event. She gave her email to everyone else, and she says that she's very grateful and she's always welcome to go there. And I think we are open for that. So I would be talking with the dean to make this content like a part of the curriculum or incentivize. So one thing that we did was very successful is that we added the GDG learning paths, like they want to be a cloud engineer or a data analyst. Google, they provide these sorts of materials. We added this to the MBAN curriculum. So now they're like required to do one of these certificates. I'm not saying that we can do that with Salesforce. Of course, we're gonna see what Salesforce has in their ecosystem, which I think is huge, that could best have a fit with the students. But it's just a few ideas that I have. And of course, we start like small, step by step, these workshops, and I think it would be very useful to teach these tools to all the students. And I think the right way to attract them, especially the PG ones, is through our own university official community channels, because students they're usually not that engaged, especially UG, they're not engaged at all. But I think we have like a very bright future ahead with these events, and that's what makes everything special. Like the community, as I mentioned, is just wonderful. And I think, of course, we're talking about creativity, we're talking about innovation, we're talking about making a change, and this wonderful ecosystem, Salesforce, Google, but also the community is what makes everything be worth it. Like the smile in everyone's faces, even the networking events that sometimes we have, it makes everything get like a purpose, like a meaning. It's just amazing. So that's pretty much what I've been doing with GDG. I think the same reasoning process can apply for Salesforce somehow, and that's pretty much it. What I my experience, and I'm very excited. As soon as I get back to Boston, I want to get ahead in this plan. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Gustavo, I know Salesforce, and your experience is new to Salesforce. And the great thing about Salesforce is that you can have that developer angle. You can also do sort of like an admin configuration type of functional angle. Is it something, do you think that I know the Google model is developer focused, and I think is that's primarily their offerings is probably the GDG, right, where you're developing. Would you think your students would be, some would be interested in developing in Salesforce, but others not so much in developing? Do you think they're looking for a wide variety of ways to get to know the platform?
Yeah, I think at Holt we have all sorts of different personas. Some of them they're very open to get more technical. But usually the events that we get into more technical aspects, we don't attract that much attendance. But we had like 30, 35 ones that they always come. So we were like the purpose behind GDGs, like Google Developer Group, is to develop solutions. It's for developers. But we had to adapt ourselves since we're the business school. We don't have we're gonna have like computer science major next year. So Holt is they want to create this ground for improving their technical capacity for students. But we kind of like what I use we usually say is that we trap the students. We get them into our community and then we show this technicalities and why they're important. So we do Google kind of like requires us to do these technical events and we do them. Usually we do them ourselves, so they share the content with us, and sometimes we invite an expert, and that's always a grateful event. It's always a good session. We do have some attendance for that as well. As I mentioned, we have the build with AI. That's what Google they has been doing, like this program, and we build like solutions using Google tools. Um, but yeah, we just to answer your question in a simpler way, we do that. We're open to all sorts of different personas between our students. We have a couple of like students that they really are interested in getting better, technically speaking, and of course everything that regarding developer, we would target these materials to them. And I'm sure that, I'm well aware that that's would be your primary focus, if I'm not wrong. And then I think it would be a good thing with it for the school, because there's a fit of what the school aims to achieve, what we aim to achieve as well, because we want everyone getting better and better, and of course what you guys has to offer.
Okay, cool. That sounds good.
Yeah, I love the fit that you mentioned, right? That ecosystem and how that kind of fits into the Google Developers Group. I think the awesome thing that I'm hearing is like, yes, I think there's a lot of technical folks in Salesforce who are really focused on the development side. Tim mentioned the admin side, but we also need business analysts, right, to gather those requirements, to refine those requirements so we can be effective in developing those technical solutions. So it sounds like there's a lot of value there for multiple roles and multiple levels. And like you said, hopefully capturing the interest of lots of folks. I love that you mentioned specifically your size, right? Allowing you to be nimble because you can kind of get to the most, interesting stuff or where folks are looking. I know Tim and I, that's one thing that we love to see is, getting ideas from the community. What do our attendees want to hear about? That way we can start tailoring our content to them specifically. So awesome to hear that that's going so well for you.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned, like small steps in the beginning so we can get this iteration, distraction, so we can understand what they're demanding. But I think there's still like a gap, as I mentioned, and I think Salesforce could fill that gap. And as I mentioned, when we were alone, when we didn't have this partnership with our university, the events they were pretty harsh to do them because we would only have like 20, 30 attendees. It would be very tough. But since we have these official communication channels from our university with the students, especially the PG ones, ever since we got this partnership, things like changed a lot. And GDG valued that a lot as well. We signed like a contract of six fixed events per year with them. So I think that would be the right approach. I would talk with the dean. I don't know who is responsible for the international marketing program, but I think there's a good fit for them and for the and Ben as well. But I think that would be the right approach. And of course, we start iterating and we're going to start learning what the students want. Until we got this adoption, this fit for GDG, it took a while. It was mainly Faisal's good work, as Tim knows, that created this solid foundation that I'm just using right now. So it's more like his merit than mine. I'm just enjoying the fruits. But of course, we will do the same with Salesforce, and I think that's what works.
Awesome. Well, super cool to hear. And thanks so much for coming in and sharing with us for sure. All right. Well, anything else for Gustavo before we jump over to our survey topic? All right. Sounds like nothing at the moment. All right. So I'm going to share my screen briefly just to kind of set the stage. This is the second of kind of two parts of our meetings that we've talked about our survey process. So Monday of this week, we kind of went through a presentation about requirements gathering, the different objects we're going to need, the different activities we think we may need for a survey process. So I'm going to share my screen just to run through that presentation real quick, just to kind of recap and set the context, and then we will jump into our hands-on build. Okay, so I'm going to scroll up here. Hopefully everybody can see the presentation that I'm kind of scrolling through quickly. Right, and it looks like the formatting's going a little off in Google, so I'm going to unshare and reshare. Just one moment. It's always the best part of live demos, right? It's probably going to take me longer to find this than it will just to walk through that slightly poorly formatted PDF. So actually, I'm going to reshare that and we will just keep it moving. All right, so we kind of talked through the why of surveying our members on Monday. Trying to gather feedback, make sure that we understand, how are our products, how are our experiences kind of landing with our members, our customers, our event attendees, whoever it may be. The big building blocks that we'll need for this, we're going to need a Salesforce object. So we're going to need a custom object to kind of capture these results. And the big important thing to remember with this object is that we want it to be flexible. We want to be able to have this survey object be used in a product capacity, in an event capacity, maybe if you're a financial institution in a transactional capacity. So you're really going to want to kind of try to think about what are your large buckets where you think you may want to survey on. And this is going to allow you to kind of repurpose and reuse fields across these, different survey types. Where applicable, something like a promoter score, you can ask in a product survey, you can ask it in an event survey. And then you'll also have specific fields that you're not going to share across survey types. So something like how was the event attendee, how was the event presenter information, right? How was the quality of the event presented? That sort of stuff is going to be very specific to the event. So you're going to want to think about this up front to make sure that your architecture is kind of in line with how you plan to use these moving forward. Page layouts are also something we'll talk about briefly as we go through creating this custom object in Salesforce. For folks who are going to be analyzing these within your CRM, we'll want to understand what questions are shared, what do we want kind of available to everybody, and then what do we maybe want to try to segment out and allow to collapse. I think I shared the example on Monday of something like a product survey where for a financial institution, I'm going to send surveys on mortgages that close. Maybe I'm going to send product surveys on checking accounts, deposit accounts, maybe something on a home equity line of credit. Different business analysts are going to care about some of those and not others. Somebody analyzing mortgage surveys is probably not going to care about your deposit projects. So how can we make these page layouts, again, flexible for our users so they can get to the information they want to see fairly quickly? Emails and landing pages, we're going to need an email to deliver our survey links. So this is something that will trigger likely after an activity, maybe something like the event. We'll send it next day, maybe as soon as the event closes, or maybe it's something more generic. Maybe we just want to send an annual survey to everyone, just asking in general, how's your experience with your organization? So the triggers may vary, but you'll definitely need emails for each of your survey types to make sure that we're delivering that content. And then landing pages. So ideally, they're going to click on that link. Let's take this survey. We want to make sure that we're serving them up a cloud page that's relevant to that survey, relevant to the recipient. So we're going to have to create those within Marketing Cloud. We'll need a couple data extensions. So we're going to need these both for the source. So how are we going to trigger our emails? And then also for our targets. So when this survey gets submitted, we're going to use a data extension to actually capture that information and store it within Marketing Cloud. And then I think the cool thing about this is that we're trying to step back from developer capabilities for a moment here. So we're going to be trying to focus on admin capabilities, which means we're going to be using smart capture forms. And the great thing about this is that we're going to be able to use these smart capture forms not only to populate our data extension within Marketing Cloud Engagement, but also to power a journey and journey builder, which we can then use to create our survey object within Salesforce using Marketing Cloud Connect, as well as starting to analyze those responses to create cases for triage if somebody's not happy, maybe to follow up on testimonial opportunities if they do love us. We can scan for keywords and text-based responses to identify maybe we want to follow up with this member on a particular issue. So it's really going to unlock some pretty wide capabilities within our CRM environment for us. So those are the big blocks. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I will kick it over to our hands-on builder, Tim. All right. And I will kind of preface this. So there's a large amount of objects needed here, right? We're going to need some email, some landing pages. We'll need to create a journey. We're going to have to create an object over in Salesforce CRM. And all of these pieces are going to interact with each other. So it's absolutely a little bit of a chicken and egg exercise where we're going to start building, pieces in one object. We may put it down and come back to our email. For our email, we're going to have to direct it to the cloud page. So that has to exist before the email so we can, point it to the right place. But we'll also need those data extension fields kind of determined up front. So I've given Tim kind of a scratch pad with some of the fields that we're going to use. You may see that on screen every now and then. But in practice, as you start building these, you're going to find yourself jumping back and forth between the various platforms and various studios for sure. So don't be alarmed if you kind of find yourself doing that. I think the last thing I'll say before we actually jump into hand-on building is that we're going to do this in such a way that it's going to be really scalable. So as you want to create new survey types, it's really easy to create a new record type in Salesforce. You can duplicate your cloud page, modify the code where necessary. You should be able to reuse a lot of these assets from survey to survey. At least that's the goal of how we've kind of architected this. So with that said, I think we've got just over an hour. So we're going to move fairly quick. Please, if you're watching the recording later, don't hesitate to reach out. I think we'd be happy to answer questions, for anybody who's watching this in the future. All right, so I think the first thing we should start with is our actual survey object. So what we'll do is we'll head into setup in CRM, and we're going to create a custom object to capture our survey results. We're going to kind of start at the end here. So again, we want to be thinking about this up front. What are the various surveys that we think we as an organization may be sending out, whether that's products, transactional, experience surveys? You want to kind of have a rough idea of where you think you may go in the future, just because you're going to want to reuse as much of this as possible. In this case, we're going to just be building a fairly generic member experience survey. So our use case will be that we want to send a survey to all of our members. We want to try to hit everybody, at some point throughout the year annually, just to ask, hey, how do you feel about us as an organization? Are you having a good experience? Yes or no? And if not, or if so, why? Give us a little bit of context around that so we can start analyzing that data. So we're going to jump into Object Manager and we're going to create a new object for our actual surveys. So we'll create new custom object. And ideally, if the name's available, we're just going to call this survey. All right, we can leave the regular label in there. A plural might be surveys, for example. API name looks great. Description for best practices, maybe just say, used to support member surveys, customer surveys, whatever your use case is. Awesome. I think allowing reports might be helpful. Again, depending on your organization, you may want to report on this within CRM. You may feed it out, to another. I know what I've done in the past is use CRM analytics to analyze these survey data, kind of giving stakeholders the abilities to say, I care about product surveys or I care about experience surveys. We've since migrated to our data and analytics team, actually exporting these from our data warehouse and using Power BI. So I think the great news is by tracking these results in CRM, you allow yourself to take it in a lot of directions depending on what's helpful for your organization. All right, so I think we should be good to save this, and we'll move on to creating a handful of fields. Awesome. So in terms of fields and relationships, we've got a fair amount of fields that we're probably going to want to create. You may create more as you build more and more surveys, but for now, I think we'll want some sort of excuse me as I scroll down here, a field to connect the relationship. So we'll want a lookup to the account, most likely. We should create that. And Tim, I'm not sure the naming conventions within this partner org specifically, but we want to look up to our account object. And the big, driver behind this is making sure that anybody who's analyzing the survey can get to the actual member or customer who submitted it, and vice versa. If I am looking at, let's say Tim has left a survey, and I happen to be looking at Tim's account, I'm going to pick up the phone and give him a call to try to pitch him on something. I want to understand if Tim submitted a survey within the past week that says that he's really upset with us, right? Because I may have a very different phone call depending on his current feelings about us. All right, so we've got a lookup relationship. That looks good. We're going to relate it back to our account. Awesome. Okay, and I would probably just name this account, will be my guess, since that's what we're looking up to. Awesome.
That would be the account ID.
Yes, the account ID is what we're going to be passing from our source DE within our emails and then capture within our data extensions. There may be some considerations around this if you're using person accounts, so just be aware of that if you're using Marketing Cloud. I know for myself, most organizations that I'm in, if we've got Marketing Cloud Connector, which is going to be kind of crucial for some of this functionality, you're going to be used to using your contact ID as your subscriber key. So just be aware, ideally, you've already synchronized your account object as well, and you've kind of got that available to you. But in this case, CRM, we're really going to be focused on the account object. So that's what we're going to try to relate this to. Awesome. Okay, so in this case, we don't want it to be read-only. We want to make sure that we're actually able to populate this value from our Marketing Cloud Connect user. My guess is that we've got an integration user between clouds here. So as long as we're just double checking our permissions to make sure that they've got access to it, we should be good to go. And again, depending on your setup organizationally, you may have Marketing Cloud folks who are comfortable on the CRM side. You may need to partner with your Salesforce CRM admin for this portion to create your object and actually make sure that your permissions are good. But in this case, we're probably using a system user, so I'm going to guess that our defaults are probably okay.
I can just collect visible if that's
Sure.
so that either way on account errors.
Yeah, sounds great. Worst case, we create a troubleshooting object for later, right? Awesome. All right, and then we'll create this page layout by default. This is great, but just keep in mind as you create different survey types, highly recommend different layouts. As you start creating specific questions for different survey types, different survey subtypes, you'll likely want dedicated page layouts for each bucket. That way you can make sure that you've just got the right fields, in front of the right people. Awesome. Okay, and this is going to create an added list just to our account object. So again, when you're looking at that account, you can see any surveys that they've recently submitted. Looks good. Save and new sounds good. So we've got a couple more, more straightforward fields that we're going to create. I'd love some text fields for our survey type. And this will be, again, our large bucket. So in this case, a text field would be great. And we'll just call this survey type. And for this one, we're probably going to end up populating this with a value of member experience. But again, this may be something like a product, might be something like a transaction. This is really going to be your top level object distinction here. Field length 255 is probably perfect.
type of survey.
Yep. Awesome.
Anything else in here?
I don't think so. I think we're good to go.
Make it easy.
Looks perfect. We can hit save and new. And we're going to create one more field for surveys subtype. This will also be a text field with length of 255. And this is where you can kind of get into that next level of granularity. So in this case, we've got a member experience survey. You might trigger these in different scenarios. So you might trigger this after a particular action has happened with your member. Or in this case, we're treating this as just kind of an annual survey. So that's the value that we'll end up populating this with from Marketing Cloud. But again, you might want to send this quarterly. You may have different experience surveys. Maybe on an anniversary, you'll send a different subtype. So this is really a way to kind of get, that next level down of granularity. For example, if you had a type of transaction, you might have subtypes of in-branch, online, mobile app, things of that nature. So really, we're just trying to create a couple levels here, so we can reuse these objects and these types, but really kind of report on different levels against each other. This looks great. Awesome. So we'll save and new. We're going to create two more fields, and these are going to be to capture our actual results. So in this case, these are also both going to be text fields. We're going to create one for our promoter score response. So our question in this case will be, how likely are you to recommend the Boston Salesforce Marketers Group to your friends or family? We're going to capture a result on that. The reason that I've set this up as a text field instead of as a number field is that we may want this to be null. We may want to be able, to analyze these later on. So we can kind of convert this text field into a numerical score using some functions on the CRM side for reporting purposes, but we can't necessarily do the reverse. So this is going to, kind of determine how you can actually quantify these scores and handle nulls without actually impacting, your numbers overall. So that looks great. I think we'll keep the defaults from here on out. That looks perfect. And then our last field, we'll create an additional comments field. This is going to be a long text field, actually, if you don't mind, Tim. Perfect. And we should be able to just keep the defaults from here. I call this additional comments. This is really going to provide our survey respondent an area to kind of give us any additional color that they'd like about this survey. We may say, you've given us a score. Great. What's your reasoning for this score? We talked about this a little bit on Monday, but this is a great way to allow kind of people who are not so happy with you to kind of tell you why, give them an opportunity to kind of put that in front of you before they go to a review site where they may be telling the rest of the world exactly how they feel about you. And if they're happy, this is a great way for them to tell you why they're happy, right? You may be able to analyze this for your contact center agents, for members within your organization who are providing, service that's above and beyond. This is really where those details can come to light. So I think we are good to save here. Awesome. I'd love to take just a quick look at the default page layout just to make sure that we've got everything kind of laid out there. And again, as you kind of flesh this out and you add more fields, more questions, you'll want to just pay attention to what's there by default, create some sections that are collapsible just for readability. In this case, we've got our promoter score, we've got our additional contents listed there, survey type, survey subtype, a lookup to the account. Our survey name is going to be auto-generated as these come in, and we've got an owner as well. So I think this looks good. So I think we're probably good to save this. And then we can head on over to our email. So we'll head over to Marketing Cloud Engagement. And actually, you know what? We should probably start with our data extension, excuse me, not the actual email content. So Tim, if you want to jump into Email Studio and then data extensions, we can kind of create our source data extension that we will use to actually trigger emails asking our members to take the survey.
Hi, Dinah. How are you?
How are you?
Hi, how's it going? We've got somebody else just joining the meeting in person here. So come on in. Welcome. How are you?
Good.
We've got some folks online as well. I don't know if you want to sit next to myself or Tim just so you can see screens or yeah. Couldn't figure out how to throw it up on the big TV, unfortunately.
Okay.
So awesome. Welcome. All right. Well, we'll make sure to carve out some time in a little bit as well. I think Dinah's got some information for us as well that she'll be sharing in just a little bit. So in this case, we're going to jump into our hands-on folder, and we're going to create a new data extension to actually trigger these survey emails out to our members. So we'll want to think about a couple different fields here. Absolutely we'll need the ones that we just created within our survey in terms of promoter score response and additional comments. But we'll also want to include things like our upsert ID. So this is going to be really important. We talked on Monday, about our need to tie this survey to a particular instance. And apologies, Tim, I think on your scratch pad, this is actually labeled primary key. So what we want to make sure that we're avoiding is the situation where somebody may come back to their survey email weeks or months later and populate a survey a second time. That it can modify your data. It can change your reporting results if you're not careful about it. So we want to create a model in which case we're tying this survey to a particular instance. In this case, for example, we're just going to be using our contact ID and our date. That'll let us know that this particular survey response is tied back to this individual and triggered on this date. That way, once they actually submit this survey, we can capture that and avoid re-triggering this to them in the future or allowing them to fill it out a second time in the future. That way, we can kind of maintain our data integrity over time. Some other fields that we'll end up using for here. So Tim, I've got this, I think, towards the top under email source DE fields. We'll need our primary key, first name, last name, always helpful to have for personalization purposes, just kind of at a bare minimum. We'll create our account ID. We'll use our contact ID as our subscriber key, an email address to deliver this to, and then I love to include a date to SFMC field. I will default that out to just the present date when data is imported. Super helpful for troubleshooting. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, did the survey go? Did it not go? If there's any discrepancies between whatever your triggering mechanism is and when that data showed up in SFMC, gives you a nice receipt to kind of look at that and say, well, this is when I got it, and we can kind of troubleshoot from there. All right, so I think next up, we'll just be trying to create those fields.
What did you have? Do you want me to name this?
Yeah, primary key would be a good first one.
For the data extension name?
Oh, excuse me, for the name, yes. So I would just call this something like member experience surveys or something similar. Looks good. And you can populate these in a couple different ways. Maybe your actions are happening within CRM and you want to import it from a CRM report. Maybe you've got this populated, via a data activity coming from an external system. Maybe Informatica is passing things over or something similar. Maybe you're using your marketing cloud data initially, right? They've taken an action and you want to follow up on that. Maybe you're using Automation Studio. Get lots of different ways to get this data in there. But once we're there, this is going to be our source data extension for our email send to kind of deliver this survey out to our members. Please, if there are any questions, don't hesitate to come off mute. Really want this to be interactive, so we're happy to kind of jump in different directions as warranted.
Is there any reason why you're making everything 150?
I think that's usually just a safe number. I think sometimes 50 characters can be a little short. Something like our account ID and contact ID, those should be 18 digits theoretically. You'll see email address is going to default to 254. Generally, your
Mine
data
is like
will dictate
first
that.
name, last name, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think something 50, I think, is the default. That should cover you in most situations. But once you start getting into names, perhaps not American names, hyphenated names, things like that. I know 50 in extreme cases can be not enough. 150, I would hope, would cover you, really across the board. I know there's really nothing worse than getting personalization that's been clipped or something similar. So I think the goal is probably just to keep more than you think you'll need. But yeah, Tim, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it could have been 50. Sometimes you never know with first name, last name. Sometimes they can come in wrong. And like you said, Matt, if it's not the right length and it errors out, that's tough. So sometimes and you're always balancing, too big of a field can be unwieldy, but I don't know. Others might be different. 150 might be too much, but 100. Matt, any thoughts on primary key, default, or nullable on any of these fields?
Yeah, so I think we'll take that top one, our primary key field. That'll absolutely be marked as a primary key. Again, we're going to be using contact ID underscore date. You'll control this with whatever your source automation is. I think the real thing that we just want to avoid is using something like a contact ID as a primary key, because ideally your member is going to be getting more than one survey. So if we've got a primary key here, it's really going to prevent you from surveying them more than once. That might be okay for our first year, but depending on your data setup, they'd get ejected at year 2. If you want to do something like a quarterly survey, that obviously accelerates that concern timeline. Things like first name, last name, I would say should both be nullable. Maybe a default of valued member, valued client. Again, I'd leave that up to you and your normal best practices. Account ID and contact ID, in this case, we will both want required. So our contact ID, we're going to map in our send relationship, and we'll want that account ID to be actually related on our survey object. So we created that lookup field. We're going to populate that. This may not be the case in your organization, depending on how you've set up. But in this case, we're going to be expecting those values for everyone who comes through this process. Email address, we'll want that required as well. We're going to be delivering these surveys through email. Again, you may create a QR code based situation. Maybe you're going to be generating print letters. Possibilities are endless, but in this case, we're going to be expecting an email address. And then date to SFMC, I would check that box for nullable, but then we're also going to create a default value. We're just going to use current date. And again, this is just going to give us a good timestamp as that data hits your system to make sure that we've got a record of when this came into our kind of control as marketing cloud admins. For our send relationship, we're going to be using contact ID in this case. Again, based on your data model, you may be using email address, you may be using a proprietary key, but that's what we're going to be using for this exercise. All right, I think we are good to go. Awesome. And while we are creating data extensions, I think the next thing we should do is probably create our survey target. So my gut is telling me that we can probably duplicate this, Tim, and then we'll add a couple additional fields to it. So we're going to reuse a lot of what we just did from our email source. And then we're going to pass over just a couple more. And in this case, I definitely suggest with your naming conventions just to clearly identify it as results. So in this case, I might do member experience survey results. But we want something to kind of distinguish this, as this is going to be the target of our smart capture form. This is where our survey results are going to live on the marketing cloud side. Awesome. All right, so a couple fields that we're going to add. In this case, we can probably delete out our date to SFMC field. So we can remove that entirely. We're going to create a new field for our promoter score response, or I think promoter score results is what we named it on CRM side. So again, naming conventions, you'll probably want to name, keep that consistent across your various platforms. So I think promoter score results is what we called it in CRM. So we should be good to reuse that.
Do you want the API name with underscores or the?
So I would probably use the plain text. I think, again, this is up to you and how you consider naming conventions across your larger organization. In this case, we're going to be mapping this stuff anyways. So I would probably default to using the plain English names just for readability purposes. But you may feel differently. If you use API names across your marketing cloud instance, it probably makes sense to keep that consistent here. All right, we've got text. I think we defaulted to 50 within CRM, so I'd keep that the same here. In practice, I don't think we'll use more than 2. but that should be okay. And then nullable in this case, if we're not going to enforce it, I would probably check that as nullable on the Marketing Cloud side. Um, again, it's up to you whether you want your surveys to require responses for every question or not. I like to leave things nullable in a 2-question survey. That may not make sense, but once your surveys start hitting 10 questions plus, you want to avoid fatigue. Just people who see a lot of questions, they don't want to answer everything. They may bounce rather than be forced to answer a question if you make them go back up. So just be mindful of that. Next field we'll want to add is our additional comments. So this is going to be our long text field on the CRM side. So this is probably going to be a little bit longer than Marketing Cloud likes. I think they've got an is it 8,000 character limit? I know
4,000.
it's 4,000. Okay, so we'll want to limit that on the Marketing Cloud side to 4,000 characters. I know there used to be a workaround where you could just leave that null to kind of get around that. I had heard some rumors, I think on LinkedIn last year, that they were cracking down on that, but I haven't seen it in practice. So I don't know if that's true or not. So I think Tim's doing a pro tip here where he's just kind of leaving it blank, and that may get around that field limitation.
We'll play it.
Yeah. All right. We'll play it safe. We don't want Salesforce to come knocking on our door on that one. So awesome. And then the last thing we're going to do is we'll create a new field for survey date. And this is going to be different than our date to SFMC and our source date extension. This is going to be the date that our survey was actually taken. And this is going to be really helpful on the reporting side when you want to capture, sentiment month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter. I may get this survey, today on October 29th. I may ignore it, and then I get upset 2 weeks from now when I'm on the phone with somebody, and I may populate that. I'll go back in my inbox, I'll pull up the survey, and I'll leave you some nasty notes. It can be really helpful for monitoring sentiment over time. There's no, I would say that there's no absolute way to do it. If you want to report off of when your surveys were triggered, I think there can be, some benefits of that. But for me, I found the most value in kind of tracking sentiment over time. It's not necessarily when the triggering event happened, but it's capturing the sentiment at submission time. And that can be really helpful. We see this sometimes in financial services. I send out surveys. Online banking goes down a month later, and all of a sudden people are submitting, based on a transaction that happened a month ago. But really, what happened is they went to go into their online banking. Things didn't look right. They couldn't get in. They pulled up that survey and they let me know today that they were unhappy. It's really not tied to that transaction, but the data is still helpful to have for reporting purposes. So that's why I really like to timestamp these with whenever it was submitted. All right. Well, I think that should be good for our target date extension. So we should be good there. All right. So next we come to our next kind of chicken and egg question is which one do we want to build first, our cloud page or our email? Our AMP script is going to be leveraged in both of these, and it's going to be fairly similar. So I would suggest that we start with the email. We'll start building stuff out there. We'll set our variables that we'll need in order to personalize and pass data to our cloud page. We'll jump over to Cloud Pages. We'll actually build our page. We're going to need the ID from that to come back to our email to point it to the right place. So we're going to kind of jump back and forth for a little bit here. So please bear with me. And then practice, you're going to have to do this as you're building stuff out, especially as you troubleshoot. You'll find that you missed a field, you misnamed something, data is not passing the way that you expect. So you can expect the first one of these to be pretty messy as you build out your framework. And then once you get comfortable with it, you can start duplicating and just modifying the code, in a minor way here and there. Awesome. So we'll create a new email. And just for timing purposes, we're going to keep this really high level. We'll give them maybe 2 answers to give us a score back on that first question within the email. Ideally, if you're going to ask them a survey question within the email, which I do recommend, you'll want to provide them obviously the full range of answers that they can provide back to you. But in this case, I don't think we want to create 10 URLs, just given our timing. So we'll create 2. Maybe we'll do 10 and 0. Survey email, I think, is a great name for these purposes, and we should be good to go. All right, so the first thing I would suggest we create is our AMP script block. So I'd suggest we drag in an HTML block and we want to set our variables. These are things that we're going to put into our Cloud Pages URL function that's going to traverse our email over to our Cloud page. So over on the Scratchpad, Tim, I think I've provided the AMP script that we can copy and paste. If you're watching the recording, don't hesitate to kind of just pause here and grab this. I do have an Upsert ID naming convention here. That is going to be our primary key in this case for our data extension. So we'll modify that. Tim, I think you've got the right stuff for the AMP script portion. So we should be good to bring that in. And what we're doing here is we're going to be doing lookups to our data extension that we're sending from and just setting these variables. So our Upsert ID, if you wouldn't mind, Tim, just renaming that to primary key within the email. Thank you so much. Awesome. All right, and what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to use all these variables in our Cloud Pages URL function, and I'll get into some specifics around that when we actually start redirecting. But that's going to make these variables available then on the Cloud page where our survey is going to live, that we're actually pointing folks to. Awesome. All right. So from here, I'd suggest we could just create a little bit of body content. Just saying, hey, member, we'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences. In this case, if we want to use the Boston Marketers Group as a test use case, we certainly can. As you can see here, Tim's going through, making sure that we're including our header blocks, our footer box, everything we're going to need to actually have this email delivered.
So something like, please fill out the survey.
Love it. I think that's great. So, and again, you'll want to dictate your language, whatever's specific to your brand, to your voice, all of that good stuff. So you can certainly flesh this out. Awesome. All right. So then the last thing I would suggest is that let's create two buttons, maybe one for a score. Oh, excuse me. We should probably ask our question right here within our email. So I guess what would we like to ask? We've got, please fill out the survey so we can hear your feedback about your banking experience with us today. I'd suggest maybe something like asking just your first question of your survey right within the email. Based on your experience with us, how likely are you to recommend Cervelo Bank to your family and friends? So, and I really like this because you can still get a little bit of information from your email, even if they don't actually go through and submit this survey. You're going to see some amount of breakage between your email and your survey landing page. So, by having this within the email itself, you can try to identify, for people who are bouncing, they happy, unhappy, things of that nature, just with your standard email tracking. Awesome. So I think the next thing I'd love to do is let's just drop two buttons in there, maybe one for 10 and one for 0. We'll leave out all the numbers in between.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be great. So if you check out Monday's session, you can see an example of some sample content where we've got, 10 through 0, kind of all in a row, kind of resembling a survey. And what that's going to allow us to do is just kind of pre-populate that surveys as they come through. But in this case, for time purposes, we've got 0, we've got 10, looks awesome. So the last thing I'd like to note before we jump over to Cloud Pages is, as of right now, we don't know where these buttons are going to go. So we haven't created the landing page yet. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to jump into Cloud Pages. We will actually create our landing page. And then we're going to capture the page that we create, the ID, and we'll come back and use some AMP script to actually have those buttons go where we want them to. Subject line, always important. Thank you, Tim, for covering that. All right. So we're going to create a new cloud page.
Landing page.
New landing page. Yep, that would be awesome. Try to keep our naming conventions just similar. Something like a member experience survey would be great here. Awesome.
Do you prefer?
I think a blank page is perfect for this. If you've got, landing pages already set up, you can certainly use an existing template. But in this case, I know we've got about 30 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get to our last speaker before we end. So I think we're going to use a blank page just to keep things moving. Awesome. All right. So I think the first thing we should do is bring in an HTML block, and this is going to look really similar to our email AMP script. So if we jump back to our Scratchpad, we should have a fair bit of under Cloud Page AMP script header. We should be able to grab that. Everything down to the field AMP script. So actually, we'll stop above that. Yeah, perfect. And we'll bring that over. There's a couple things that I'd like to call out here. We are doing a couple things in this that you may or may not want to do. So what we're doing is we're actually going to set a fair bit of variables, just the ones that we actually declared over in our email. We've got some defensive coding, some fallbacks. So if we don't have a first name, for example, we're going to populate that with valued member. You may want to do that. You may not. You may not want to address people by their first name on the survey. Totally up to you. The other thing I'll call out is that we are using a thank you URL. So in this case, we've got a redirect that upon submission, we want to redirect to a particular page. You can add AMP script here as necessary if you have dynamic pages, for your use case, to either add or subtract from that. The other thing we're doing is we've got a variable here called submit bounce, and that's actually doing a lookup to our target data extension. So as a member goes to submit, we're going to look up to see have they submitted the survey already, or even prior to submit, on page load. And that's going to say, if you've already submitted this survey, let's not even give them the opportunity to take this survey again. Let's redirect them to a page that's got some language on it saying, oops, looks like you've already submitted this survey, but we would love to talk to you. If you have thoughts, if you want to share something with us, please, you can send this to your contact us page, something similar, whatever makes sense for your particular use case. So in this case, I'm using carney.com for both of our scenarios, but just be aware you can create cloud pages for this. Maybe you've got some existing pages you can leverage. You don't have to do either of those things, but I highly recommend it just to kind of handle those situations. Awesome. All right. So I think the next thing we're going to do, we can create a text block if we'd like, just to kind of, put the survey in context. Say thanks so much for taking our survey. Please give us your feedback below, something of that nature. Awesome. And then we will actually bring in our smart capture form. So this is where we are going to, set our target data extension. It's where we're going to actually create our questions. So lots of good stuff is going to happen right within this form. So our form name, I would just call this our member experience survey. And then that checkbox above for use in Journey Builder, we want to check that. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to expose that as an entry source within Journey Builder. So as someone goes to submit this form, we can inject them directly into a journey. We're personally in this exercise going to use that to create our survey object, but we're also going to be able to use this to kind of triage negative responses or reach out for testimonials for somebody who's happy with us. All right, so a couple attributes. You can see everything that we've got listed down below. Actually, these are the defaults. So what we'll do is our data target, we're going to move this away from a Cloud Pages data extension to a standard data extension. And we're going to grab that target that we created right at the beginning of this evening. So this will be our results data extension. And we're basically telling this form, we're trying to point where we want these survey results to go to. So in this case, for fields that we can select, there's a lot here. We're going to add a lot of these as hidden attributes. We don't necessarily want our survey respondents to fill out their first name. We're going to grab that up above using our AMP script from the email that they clicked through. So in this case, what we want to do is we want our promoter score response and we want our additional comments. Those are going to be the two fields that we want to pass right here. Awesome. All right, and then for hidden attributes, we should be able to add hidden attribute down below. And this is going to give us the fields that we've got above that we haven't actually chosen for display on our form. So we're going to select all of these one by one. So as Tim goes, let's start with primary key. That would be a great one. Awesome. And then what we can do is we're going to use our AMP script to say %% equals, and then we'll use that variable that we've set up above. So in this case, it would be v open paren, and then at primary key. And what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to pass the data from these behind the scenes. So we're not going to display it to our user. We don't want them to see it. But what we do want is this to go to the target data extension. That way we can use it to associate our survey in CRM. First name, last name, again, helpful on the Marketing Cloud engagement side. We haven't created those fields on our survey object, so we probably won't pass that. So in the interest of time, probably not helpful to pass those right now, but account ID and contact ID, definitely helpful. Yeah, and the double window select here is not great. So thank you, Tim, for bearing through it. I think Dharmesh, who dropped off earlier, asked, why don't more people use smart capture forms? And I would say this particular double window, trying to scroll through, is probably a big reason. I know that definitely frustrates me every time I build one of these. So awesome. The one thing that we're not going to hook up here is our survey date. But again, you can set that, using AMP script, just with a now function, pulling in the time that this form was actually submitted. Awesome. So I think that's probably good for now, just to keep us moving. But again, you can pass more or less. The one thing that I do want to talk about, so we're going to grab this page ID. We're going to come back and we're going to pass that within our Cloud Pages URL function, but it's not required. So that Cloud Pages URL function is going to pass at least one variable that we're going to set, at least one parameter that we're going to set. And then you can do a lookup from Cloud Pages now into your data extension. So if we were to pass our primary key, we could use a lookup function on our Cloud Pages to look up the primary key within our source data extension and retrieve all of these variables. So what we're doing here in terms of passing all of these variables within the Cloud Pages URL function is not a best practice. You ideally don't want to be stuffing your Cloud Pages URL functions with all of these parameters. But it does work, and that's what we're going to do now, just because that's what we've got laid out in case of copy paste purposes, just for time. All right. So the last thing we want to do before we want to leave our cloud pages is just to adjust these fields a little bit. So Tim, if you wouldn't mind going into our smart capture form, let's grab our promoter score results. In this case, we've got it set as a text field. So let's change that to radio, please. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to set this as either 10 or 0. Again, ideally, you've got multiple options here, multiple choice from 0 all the way up through 10. But in this case, we just want to make sure that we're showing the functionality. So that looks awesome. And then again, required field, up to you whether you want to make it required or not. I think in this case, we can probably just make it required just for the point of this exercise. So awesome. And then data validation. I don't think we've got anything for a radio, but if you're using a number field or a text field or anything like that, you can absolutely set some validation on it. All right, that looks great. So one thing we may want to do is if we go to the HTML editor tab on the left here. Awesome. So we've got our HTML laid out as promoter score results here. This is where you may want to update your question. So what I would suggest that we highlight that promoter score results and let's populate that with the text of our question. Our how likely are you to recommend, Boston Salesforce Marketers Group? And Tim's absolutely doing best practice here. Let's grab it right from the email so we stay nice and consistent. Cervello Bank, that's right. Excuse me.
The name.
No, so we want to leave our name field because that's going to be mapped in our data extension all the way to the very top right after that div. Please and thank you. So it should be in row 1, that promoter score results with the asterisk. We're going to replace that. Awesome. And so that's what people are going to see when they come to our page, just so they've got a little bit more context around it. That looks great. And then for our additional comments, we can just swap that out with something like, what's the reason for your score? Something like that. Awesome. All right. And last but not least, I think we'll go down to our submit button and we'll just double check what URL we are redirecting to. All right. I'm sorry. We can't click on that. So it's going to be submit options over on the left-hand side. It's a separate tab. Awesome. All right. So in this case, we've got a confirmation message, but we can click that URL redirect. And I think up in the AMP script above, I've kind of got some examples of how we might be able to, use a custom page. In this case, we can just drop carney.com directly into that URL. Yeah.
Does it provide the HTTP?
It will do the HTTP. Yep. So we can set that. But again, if you want to use AMP script, you can, just to create a custom URL to redirect upon thank you. Awesome. We may have to change the protocol there to HTTPS. I think they've started enforcing that. Awesome. And again, there's form options here so that you can style it differently. You can adjust the HTML. It is a little finicky, so I would just warn you, if you're going in trying to do crazy things with the HTML to make it look, exactly like your brand, save early, save often, keep a document on the side would be my suggestion, just where you kind of copy paste. If you do make any sort of syntax error, Marketing Cloud is known to kind of overwrite that kind of stuff. You can lose some progress, so just be aware. All right, awesome. So I think we're good to hit done, and then we can save, and then we can publish. And the reason that we want to publish this is that, oh, we've got an error. Okay, my guess is that it's probably up in the AMP script. So if we come back, if we cancel for just a moment, if we go up to that AMP script block, we've probably got a conflict somewhere. All right, so we've got last name, promoter score responses, promoter score. All right, so I would suggest that we pull everything from 13 down, just because we're not actually using that. So our custom thank you URL, our submit bounce redirect, we can pull those.
You need a comma after thank you URL set?
After thank you URL set. We might. I'm not sure. The last thing I think I may want to look at, so we've got promoter score response, and we're requesting the parameter promoter score. I don't think we're setting anything yet.
Maybe those commas are all optional.
Yeah, I think with AmpScript, you don't want commas in between, unlike SQL, where you absolutely do. We've got some extraneous variables in here
Oh,
too.
you got a lot of comments in there. I mean, rather commas, I meant to say in there.
Um, oh, got it up top. Yeah, so we've got thank you URL. Yeah, I think that looks okay to me. So we also may be running into that upsert ID. So we've got upsert ID declared up top. I wouldn't expect that to error out, but I think that very first one, Tim, we may want to set that as primary key. And sometimes this can be contextual as well, even though it's showing a render error, but probably because we're not providing anything to it as well, which means that it may work once we actually get into the email. So hopefully we don't create a troubleshooting version for ourselves. There we go. All right, cool. That's always the question. I don't know which of those edits fixed it, but we're good to go. So Michelle, that may have been you. Appreciate the assist. Awesome. So last thing we'll want to do is we'll just go to that page properties section, and we're going to want to grab the ID of the cloud page. So that 3639. Awesome. All right. So we'll come back to our email. We'll drop that in there. Awesome. And then, of course, you can see I've got upsert ID in here as well instead of primary key. So we want to swap that out at your convenience, Tim. It's the
For both
dang.
of them?
Yes, please.
What's the 3639?
So that's the page ID of that cloud pages page that we just created. So what this is doing, this cloud pages URL function, it's going to redirect it to the cloud page that we just spun up, but we'll want to give it the ID so it knows which of our cloud pages to actually point to. And then last thing, Tim, we can do it on the Scratchpad or we can do it in the email builder. I've got double quotes around the page ID. We'll probably want to swap those out with singles.
Logo is href.
Yep. Awesome.
Singles on 3639.
Please. Thank you. And then the last thing we'll want to do, you should probably just copy this entirely before we make an edit. So if you notice towards the end of this here, we're also passing our promoter score value of 10. In this case, this is going on our 0 button. So we would want that to be 0. And the reason for this is that on our cloud page, when we get to our results, we can actually pre-populate that radio button for our users. So we're not making them populate it both. You're clicking the button in the email, and then I'm going to ask you to do it again to the landing page. I'm asking you to do the same thing twice. So we'll want these hrefs to be specific to the score button that they're actually clicking. So what we can do is then use if-then statements on the cloud page to say, if the value is 10, that's coming over in the parameter, let's mark that as checked. If not, we'll leave it as blank, and we'll do that down the line until we get to whichever one that we do want to pre-populate. So in this case, on the 10 button, we'll just replace that promoter score with 10. And again, we're not going to do that just in the interest of time. We're not going to create that functionality tonight, but that's certainly something that you can do, and maybe we'll pick that up in a future session. Awesome. All right, so we're coming up on time. I want to make sure we get to our guest speaker, so we are going to try this and see if we can get this to populate first try, and we'll give it a go. If not, we will pick it up next time. So if we want to preview this email, please, against our source data extension, I guess we probably need to create some test data in that data extension. I don't think we've loaded anything. I don't have a CSV prepped. I'm not sure if we want to move over to Contact Builder, if that would be the fastest way to. Thank you. So, and I think I did on that scratch pad. I've got the values there. We just need to copy paste them. So, in full disclosure, this is turning into a three-part series. So we'll create our journey, that will end up powering with the Smart Capture form. We'll pick that up in a future Marketing Cloud Monday session.
It's this data extension, right?
Yes, please. Yep, that'd be perfect. But this should at least let us validate our data passing through on the Marketing Cloud side and that our Smart Capture form is functional.
Sorry, what was the primary key again?
So the primary key is to make sure that we've got a survey and an individual tied to a specific instance. You may not want a primary key in your use case, but really we're going to use this for is to prevent somebody from taking the same survey twice. I don't want somebody to come out of this event and be really happy, be thrilled with us and, come through and say, great, everything was awesome. Then they have a poor experience a couple weeks later. They go back in their email inbox, put up that survey, really let us have it. And then our data is now changing over time. So we want to kind of lock this survey to have a single submission for the single instance. And the primary key is going to allow us to do that by concatenating the ID of the individual that we're sending the survey to with either a date-based identifier or maybe it's a particular event. We've got an event ID we can concat with that. We're really just trying to limit this to say this particular survey is in this particular instance to this particular person. That way it can only be filled out once.
But you have to put some coding in to do that, right? Because just because it has a date doesn't mean that it's unique. I mean, they could come in on the 30th and do another one otherwise.
Yep. So this is our source DE where things are triggered from. So you're right. You would need some sort of coding to identify that. But this is saying that this is the survey sent to Tim on the 29th. So if Tim gets another survey on the 30th, Tim's allowed to take that survey on the 30th because it was a separate triggering event. So you will need to have some sort of throttling to prevent, multiple surveys from going to Tim in the same day, unless he attended two events and you're using an event ID instead of the date. So you're right. You absolutely need to think about, what is that primary key going to be to make it unique. But for example, Tim doesn't have to take it on this date. This is just the date that we're sending it to him. So he can submit it, on November 3rd, no problem. But once he does, the October 29th triggered survey is now done for Tim. We're going to lock him out from trying to adjust that again. All right. So Tim, fingers crossed, if you click one of those buttons, we should get to our cloud page. Ooh, there we go. Not the prettiest, but it's working. So I would say, based on your experience, how likely are you going to recommend us? I'm off screen over here holding up 10 fingers. You better give us a 10, right? Awesome. Thank you for the kind words. Let's hope it actually gets submitted. All right. It looks like we may have a challenge here on the redirect. All right. So I saw you click the submit. Doesn't look like it worked. I'm going to ask you to click one more time just to see if we've got a challenge with the redirect or something else going on. So let's jump back into Marketing Cloud, please, and let's check our target data extension just to see if our data has been processed. That'll help us troubleshoot whether this is an issue with our processing code overall or if it's just an issue with the redirect on submit. So we're just going to see if any of those values came over into our results data extension. All right, and no results. So that'll be the first thing we do as we pick this up at our future Marketing Cloud Monday session will be to figure out where did we go wrong. So what do we need to check on this? And then beyond that, what we'll do is we will actually hook this up so that our results as they come in, they'll power a journey and we can actually create the object within CRM and then any supplemental functionality we want, whether it is case creation, keyword-based case creation, things of that nature. So Awesome. Well, sorry we didn't get our results today, but I promise we'll get there in a future session. So I want to make sure I leave at least a couple minutes. I'm sorry, I don't know if is it Dinah? Is it Dina? Dinah. Perfect. Okay, we had it right. Shouldn't second guess myself. Would you like to? Awesome. All right. So we're going to move the camera around, and Dinah is going to be talking to us about a November in-person meeting from our higher ed team.
I'm just here to do some shameless plugs. So if anybody's interested in higher ed, we have a Boston-based or Northeast-based higher ed group. We do both marketing and admin and just overall, talk about the higher ed industry. So our in-person event, we're still in the middle of getting some venues and dates down, but it'll be mid-November, probably first week of December. But we're really excited. We'll get try to get as many colleges and universities in Boston in person and have a blast. Yeah. And then my second shameless plug is if you're looking for a job, I just posted a position for Berklee College of Music. So if you're interested in, joining a team that is all up in Salesforce Marketing Cloud day in and day out, supporting our very, very talented students, reach out. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I think that's the big stuff that we've got for tonight. Kind of not super firm yet, but we are hoping to have a holiday event within the Boston area for multiple user groups in the area. So if you are local to the Boston area, definitely keep your eyes open for that. We will send out more information as it kind of firms up. So we are hoping to have one more event before the end of the year. Any other questions? Sorry again that we didn't get to see our fancy results come through. So like I said, we'll schedule another session where we'll jump into that and kind of how we can extend functionality beyond it. But any questions in the meantime?
Matt, I was just actually dropped off for a few minutes. So yeah, would you be uploading this on the YouTube channel, please?
Absolutely. Yep. So what we will be doing, let me go get so it's youtube.com/@handsonsfmc. I will put this in the chat as well. But yes, so what we do is we create YouTube videos with all of our recordings. So we are recording this session. So it'll be posted there in a couple days. Looks like Monday's session actually got up already. So that's out there. So you can check out the first one in the series. You can see this one. And then when we do our next series or our next meeting on this topic, that'll be posted as well. So ideally, hopefully we'll get it across the line in just 3 sessions and then we won't have to extend it to 4. We got a little bit of work to do to make sure that happens. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I couldn't come on camera because I'm at my workplace. Right
Oh,
now.
good. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It's a wonderful session.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hopefully we find it useful. And again, we'll button this up in another week or 2. And, you'll be able to take this back to the workplace and kind of build it as it fits your needs. So thanks again for coming out, everybody. Really appreciate it on a Wednesday night. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Awesome.
Thanks. Have a good night.